Imagine a horror movie so disturbing, so viscerally terrifying, that entire countries decided their citizens shouldn't be allowed to watch it. These aren't just films that made you jump or kept you up at night. These are movies that crossed lines, shattered boundaries, and forced governments to say no. This is too much. Today, we're counting down the top 10 horror movies, so scary, they're banned in some countries. From brutal violence to psychological torment that goes way too far, these films pushed the envelope until it tore completely open. And trust me, number 1 might be the most infamous horror film ever made. Let's dive into the darkness. Kicking off our list at number 10, we have Eli Roth's Hostel. This film follows a group of backpackers traveling through Europe who get lured to a hostel in Slovakia, only to discover it's a front for a torture club where wealthy clients pay to mutilate and kill people. Yeah, pleasant vacation, right? Hostel became the poster child for what critics dubbed torture porn, and that label didn't sit well with everyone. The film's unflinching depictions of sadistic violence led to it being banned in countries like Ukraine and New Zealand. Censors argued it glorified torture for entertainment, and honestly, they weren't entirely wrong about how brutal it gets. But here's the thing. Beneath all that blood, Roth was making a point about privilege, exploitation, and the commodification of human suffering. Not everyone wanted to look that deep, though. Sometimes, the horror is just too real. At number 9, we're going back to the movie that made Wes Craven's reputation and got him into serious trouble. The Last House on the Left tells the story of 2 teenage girls who were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by a gang of criminals. By cruel twist of fate, the killers end up seeking shelter at the home of one victim's parents, who then exact their own brutal revenge. This film was banned or heavily censored in the UK, Australia, and several other countries for decades. Why? Because Craven shot it like a documentary. The violence feels disturbingly real, raw, and completely devoid of Hollywood polish. There's no catharsis here, just unrelenting cruelty that leaves you feeling sick. The UK didn't fully lift its ban until 2008. That's over 35 years of being deemed too dangerous for audiences. Craven wanted to make a film about the savagery lurking beneath civilization's surface, and he succeeded a little too well. Number 8 is where things get deeply uncomfortable. Italian director Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salò is set in fascist Italy during World War II, for wealthy libertines kidnap 18 teenagers and subject them to 4 months of extreme psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. Based on the writings of the Marquis de Sade, this isn't just horror, it's an endurance test. Salò has been banned in multiple countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and Finland, at various points. Even today, it remains censored or restricted in several nations. The film's graphic depictions of degradation are almost unwatchable. And that's exactly Pasolini's point. He was creating an allegory about fascism's corruption of humanity. Tragically, Pasolini was murdered shortly before the film's release, and we'll never know if he'd have defended his vision or regretted how far he went. What we do know, this film tests the absolute limits of what cinema can show, and whether it should. Lucky number 7 goes to a film that made even hardcore horror fans say, okay, that's enough. Tom Six's The Human Centipede franchise is notorious, but the sequel, that's where things went completely off the rails. This one follows a mentally disturbed man, obsessed with the first film, who decides to create his own Human Centipede with 12 people. The entire movie is shot in grimy black and white, and the violence is far more explicit than the original. The UK initially banned the full sequence outright, with the BBFC stating it posed a real risk of harm to viewers. Australia also refused classification. Eventually, both countries allowed heavily cut versions, but the unedited film remains prohibited in several places. Why? Because unlike the first film's surgical horror of the concept, this sequel wallows in brutality with no artistic restraint. Six claimed he was satirizing censorship itself. Whether you buy that or think he just wanted shock value, well, that's the debate that got it banned. Halfway through our list at number 6, we have one of the most controversial rape revenge films ever made. I Spit on Your Grave follows a young novelist who retreats to a cabin to write, only to be brutally assaulted by a group of local men. The film's second half shows her elaborate, violent revenge against each of her attackers. This film was banned or heavily censored in Ireland, Norway, Iceland, West Germany, and other countries for years. The graphic, prolonged assault scenes were deemed too disturbing and potentially harmful. Critics accused it of being misogynistic exploitation, masquerading as feminist revenge fantasy. But here's where it gets complicated. Many survivors of assault have said the revenge portion felt cathartic and empowering to watch. Others found the entire film re-traumatizing. It's a deeply divisive piece of cinema that forces uncomfortable questions about violence, justice, and who gets to tell these stories. The bans have mostly lifted, but the controversy, that's never gone away. We've reached number 5, and if you know horror, you knew this one was coming. Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust follows a rescue mission to find a documentary crew who disappeared in the Amazon rainforest. What they find instead is footage of the crew's descent into savagery and the horrifying truth about what happened. This film was banned in over 50 countries. Italy actually arrested Deodato and charged him with murder because the film looked so realistic. Authorities believed he'd actually killed his actors. He had to produce the cast in court to prove they were alive. But that wasn't the only problem. The film contains actual animal killings on camera, which remains its most controversial aspect. Beyond that, Cannibal Holocaust presents civilization as more savage than the indigenous people it claims to document. The found footage format, which this film essentially invented, makes everything feel disturbingly genuine. It's a film that questions who the real monsters are while showing you imagery you can never unsee. Even today, it remains banned or censored in several countries. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. At number 4, we enter territory that's genuinely difficult to discuss. A Serbian Film tells the story of a retired adult film star who's lured back for one last job, only to find himself trapped in increasingly horrific scenarios. The film contains scenes so extreme I literally cannot describe them here without violating content guidelines. This movie has been banned in Spain, Portugal, Norway, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore, and more. It's been seized by customs, pulled from festivals, and condemned by censorship boards worldwide. The director claims it's an allegory for Serbia's political oppression and victimization, but most viewers just see exploitation for exploitation's sake. There's a legitimate debate about whether certain imagery should ever be put on screen, even in an allegorical context. A Serbian Film sits at the center of that debate. It's not scary in a traditional sense. It's transgressive to the point of being unwatchable for most people. And honestly, that might be exactly why so many countries decided to ban it. Our bronze medal goes to a film that seems almost quaint now, but absolutely terrified the world in 1974. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre follows a group of friends who encounter a family of cannibalistic killers, including the now iconic Leatherface, shot on a micro-budget with unknown actors. The film has a gritty documentary-style realism that made audiences believe what they were seeing might actually be real. This masterpiece was banned in several countries, including Brazil, Chile, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, and the UK. Some of these bans lasted for decades. Why? Because despite containing very little actual gore, the film creates an atmosphere of inescapable primal terror. The sound design alone is enough to induce panic attacks. What's fascinating is how little blood you actually see. It's all psychological. But that relentless sense of doom, the grimy texture, the feeling that you've stumbled into a nightmare you can't wake up from, that proved more disturbing than any amount of explicit violence. It's a testament to Hooper's genius and proof that sometimes what you don't show is scarier than what you do. Our runner-up might surprise some people, but this film caused genuine mass hysteria. William Friedkin's The Exorcist tells the story of a young girl possessed by a demonic entity and the two priests who attempt to save her soul. It's based on supposedly true events, and in 1973, that connection to reality sent shockwaves through audiences worldwide. When this film released, people fainted in theaters. They vomited. They had heart attacks. Audience members genuinely believed they were watching something evil, that the film itself might be cursed. Several countries banned it immediately, and the UK ban lasted until 1999. Yes, 1999. But here's what makes The Exorcist truly terrifying. It's not just shock value. It's a masterfully crafted film about faith, doubt, and the battle for a child's soul. The practical effects still hold up today, and the sound design creates an atmosphere of profound dread. This is horror at its most technically perfect and most genuinely unsettling. Even non-horror fans know the imagery, the headspin, the stairs, the crucifix scene. The Exorcist didn't just scare people, it traumatized an entire generation and became the benchmark against which all possession films are measured. So what could possibly top this? Taking our #1 spot is the most notorious banned film of all time, Faces of Death. This documentary claimed to show real deaths caught on camera, everything from suicides to executions to animal attacks, presented as an educational exploration of death across cultures. It was marketed as authentic footage that would change how you view mortality. Faces of Death has been banned in over 40 countries. It was confiscated, censored, and condemned worldwide. But here's the twist. Most of it is fake. The filmmakers staged many of the deaths, but sprinkled in just enough real footage to make everything feel genuine. And that uncertainty, not knowing what's real and what's fabricated, is what made it so disturbing. The film spawned countless sequels and imitators, creating an entire subgenre of death footage that eventually evolved into the dark corners of the internet we know today. It crossed a fundamental line, using real death as entertainment, or at least convincing people you were. Even discussing Faces of Death feels transgressive, and that's exactly why it tops our list. It's not the scariest film technically, it's the one that made audiences confront their own fascination with death and question whether they should be watching at all. So there you have it, 10 horror films that didn't just scare audiences, they made entire governments step in and say no more. From torture porn to psychological terror, from exploitation to genuine artistry wrapped in controversy, these films pushed boundaries until they broke. Some were banned for violence, some for sexual content, some for being too real, and some just showed humanity something it wasn't ready to see. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these banned films shocked you the most? Are there any you think were justified in being banned, or do you believe censorship has no place in art? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this dive into cinema's darkest corners, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss our next horrifying countdown. We've got plenty more where this came from. And remember, sometimes there's a very good reason certain doors should stay locked. Sweet dreams.